We are back with part two, the 3 critical mistakes that landlords make as investors in Knoxville, Tennessee. So number 1, vacancy is obviously what kills you. And we went over in part 1 that screening tenants, too little or too far can really kill your cash flow. And I have seen it on every asset class, A, B, and C. A lot of times landlords will only review a tenant and see the credit and then say, nope, we don't want that, because they look at the number and say it's below my minimum and I will not go below that. And then the property sits. And in a time and place where the market is shifting to be softer and supply is rising, we kind of need to pay attention to reviewing every application and considering everyone until we find the right person. And how I do that with credit is I start looking at debt and I start looking at collections, because that makes the conversation more 3D compared to the 2D version of just saying, well, they're below 700 credits, so I'm not interested. With the tenant screening, tip number 1, why their credit is where it's at. So if you're at a 6 or 650 credit and your requirements are 700 for your property, let's even get wilder. Let's say the person has 550 credit and you can pull that and review it. You will have the capabilities of seeing what got them to that point. So the ability to review a credit score's depth is where the details matter. Mistake number 2 is just having slow maintenance. So, you got properties, whether they're A, B, or C class, and when customers don't get what they want, they can get kind of crazy. I was talking to a landlord just yesterday that's looking to onboard onto my team compared to who they were working with previously as a property manager. And honestly, I was like, well, the reasons are the tenant had an HVAC concern and the property manager had tried to address it. And long story short, it got to a point where the property manager was reciting the lease and saying, hey, if you're not able to follow these steps, we're not going to be able to work out. And if you're breaking the lease by not allowing our vendors to get in and improve the property to a livable standard, you need to consider this lease null and void. Although that's not the wrong thing to do, that might have not been the best course of action to get the HVAC vendor inside the unit. So keep that story with a grain of salt, because I'm trying to kind of remember it, but that's generally what happened. That tenant was not happy with the maintenance, and honestly, they dropped the keys off and left. And that's what happens when you forget that a tenant is a customer. And yes, you can legally try to hold people to a lease, but at the end of the day, if you're getting to the legal point of a contract between a customer and business, you're probably really far away from customer service. So that is why maintenance concerns being handled fast is so important. How to do that? Speed is relative. It's all about perception and not necessarily reality. So an HVAC vendor of yours, you call up and they say they're good for 3 days out. And you want to work with that HVAC vendor because they're a competitive price and they also are very trustworthy and won't just tell you, hey, you got to replace the unit. So you're in a situation where, your hands are a little tied, because the responsible thing for the property is to get that guy out there in 3 days and take charge of the situation, pay him his fee, and get the unit back up. And you're very confident that that's the vendor you want to work with. And if you were a homeowner, you'd probably sweat it out for 72 hours and wait and get it resolved. As a landlord, you have a customer in that house. And the way to be fast is not necessarily getting the HVAC vendor out there sooner than 72 hours. It's giving daily updates, communicating with that tenant and making them feel heard. You can do things to make it impactful, because at the end of the day, yes, customers want speed, but what they really want is to feel heard, as we all do. Mistake number 3 is just bookkeeping, man. If you are only using an Excel spreadsheet and you have 1 or 2 properties, you're probably further than most landlords. You need to have an income statement and a balance sheet minimally. I would consider them financial tools that will impact the way you train your mind to review your property's assets and return on investment. And if you're just writing down the rent every month, you're forgetting all the expenses that go into owning this asset, and it may skew you an incorrect direction when you're not aware of all the costs and all the revenue that a property brings you. And then you're making inaccurate decisions over the decade, 2 decades, 3 decades of that mortgage. So I really recommend using Buildium. It's because I understand it. So if you ever connect with me, I'll be able to walk you through income statements, balance sheets, owner draws, lease ledgers, all of these financial statements that allow you to review the situation at the money level. But the tip here is simply get past just an Excel sheet, because if you can cross-reference a income statement and your balance sheet minimally, you'll be able to learn different things like cutting down costs of vendors, different revenue sources like pet rent. You can have the opportunity to do convenience fees or upcharging lawn mowing on the tenant, anywhere where there's value to help a customer get what they want. And doing that with an income statement and balance sheet allows you to start practicing, whether you're at 1 to 3 houses or you're at 50, looking at your properties as a business. So implementing these 3 tips will get you back on track, buy back your time, and ultimately get your real estate to become passive. If it moves the bottom line and it brings value, click that button 1,000 billion times. Those are my 3 tips for today of part 2 from the problems that I went over last week. I want you to also click the link below to subscribe, like button, do anything you can to help this page grow, as I want to help more Knoxville landlords and even property managers learn what I'm doing in the marketplace. After watching this video, I know you're at the end of here, but I want you to tell me in the comments what you think of what I went over, and what are you going to change because you heard and learned these items. See you next week. Rents due. Boom.